All right, welcome back to the stock market recap for Wednesday, June 25th. And congratulations, we are at all-time highs for the Nasdaq. In this video, I'll go over the indexes, take a look at the liquid leaders, a few themes and individual stocks that I took note of today, and then end the video with long setups and short setups going into tomorrow. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be doing these daily recaps Monday through Thursday. No video on Friday, a longer weekly recap and weekly prep video on Saturday, and then a trading tips video on Sunday. All right, let's get into it. All-time highs for the Nasdaq. If you asked everyone on April 7th, they would say no way we would be at all-time highs this quickly. And for 1,000 simulations, they might have been right for 800 of them. But it does look like we've gotten the V recovery, very similar to the V recovery in 2020. And that's why I have said multiple times, go back and study the chart for the NASDAQ and from market leaders during that time, because it's as similar as we've had it in history. Today, higher highs, higher lows. We did gap up, undercut to yesterday's close, but still closed positive, up 0.26%. SPY closed basically flat, higher highs, higher lows. Still has some air to that 5-day moving average, some air to the 10-day, and the gap up zone. Now, just because the indexes made all-time highs doesn't mean that the market itself was very strong. We saw a lot of distribution out of liquid leaders, out of the growth stocks, and you can kind of see that with IWO. Outside down day on a little bit more volume than yesterday, where the high today was higher than yesterday's high, the low today was lower than yesterday's low, and we closed back into the support gap right at the 5-day and the 200-day moving average. Ideally, this is just like a 1-day kind of pause, and then we reconfirm higher. We don't want to just be putting in a lower high here and lose the 200-day simple moving average right away. But basically, my line in the sand is Monday's low, where that nice shakeout to the support gap at 272 area found support. So we'll see how we chop here, but a little bit of weakness with IWO. ARKK, a little bit of weakness as well, down 1.2%. But this just came in and tested a support gap, confirmed that there were buyers in that zone by the end of the day. And we closed over the 5-day moving average on less volume than the previous day. To me, that's not very noticeable. As long as you're closing over the 5-day moving average in an uptrend on any pullbacks getting supported at the 10-day, I would still consider you in an uptrend. And then anything further than that in the 20-day moving average, you're definitely going to be seeing some major distribution to get down there. But really, for me, I'm looking at that 10-day moving average to keep this short-term uptrend intact. And then Bitcoin, great move today through the 5, the 10, the 20-day moving average, right next to the kind of previous rally highs. Now, what I'm looking for here is just a pullback, putting in a higher low, allow that 50-day moving average to catch up, and then we can get some really quality setups out of this group. Now let's take a look at the 9 liquid leaders. We'll go by price percent change today, and you'll notice a theme of cybersecurity. CrowdStrike led the way today with a gap up, opening on the low, closing at new closing highs, and made new all-time highs. We uppercut $500 and kind of got rejected at that level, but still had a better closing range than most stocks in the market. Zscaler, weak closing range, but had a nice gap up and positive close, new closing high and new highs. Just wanted to go over some other. Actually, I'll go over that in the ETF section. But cybersecurity today, really good strength overall. Robinhood, new highs, starting to look like this might be the first kind of weekly extension. Only we'll be able to confirm that in hindsight as we follow through to the downside, but definitely a little bit extended in the short term, air to the 5-day and the 10-day. A pullback into that 10-day moving average and gap zone at $76 could be a spot to add on. Really looking at the 20-day moving average and support gap. Or if we kind of chop around here and let that 20-day catch up to that $76 area, then that's going to be an area of interest to me. But personally, I think Robinhood is the liquid leader in the market right now. So don't want to count it out before it kind of proves itself exhausted. PLTR, higher highs, higher lows, new all-time high. But we closed slightly red. Pull back into that 20-day moving average and support gap. or just gap zone for a breakout retest at 133. That's going to be an area of interest for me. ZEV outside down day, still closed over the 5-day moving average and on light volume. So unless we follow through and close under the 5-day, under yesterday's low, I still think that this could just be an uptrend and kind of a wonky day. Roblox, yesterday I said that if it's a day that ends in Y, Roblox will be up. And of course, that happens one day before Roblox has a red day. Closed right at the 5-day moving average on lighter volume than yesterday, down only 1.8, 1.9%. So we got this gap zone and 20-day moving average. That could be an area of interest around $97 in the next couple sessions. I also just noticed a gap that I didn't draw here. That's a support gap, so we'll get that drawn. Support gap and 10-day moving average could be interesting, right around $100, but the market's getting a little extended. Kind of a shakeout to a longer term moving average would be a spot where I would be more comfortable sizing up. Spotify, outside down day, still closed over the 5-day on lighter volume. And then we get into some of the more riskier or risk on type stocks. CRWV, first time closing under the 10-day moving average since this entire run has started. We have a gap down. We confirmed that it's a resistance gap, showing that sellers stepped in by the end of the day. And now we're confirming the action even lower through the 5 and the 10-day moving average. Still on lighter volume than the previous day, so it's not a disaster by any means. This could just be coming into the 20-day for the first time, testing the 20-day moving average, and then rally higher. But first time closing under the 10-day, the entire run, that's something to note. SMR also closing right at that 10-day moving average with its first gap down after making new highs, new closing highs, excuse me. An undercut of this support gap zone and the 20-day moving average could be a buy spot. And then your stop would be the previous support gap low, 34.47. This group, as we get to the daily recap, nuclear in general, kind of had a rough day and is trading uh, pretty all over the place. OKLO, I consider a secondary name in that group, already back to its 20-day moving average and support gap with the outside down day today, ending the day down 8.5%. SMR, I forgot to say, was down 10.6%, but only at the 10-day moving average. And then E, you can see we close into this gap zone, making it a support gap, but definitely decreasing the size of that zone. Undercut the 10-day and then had a mini rally, but down 9.7% on the day, not ideal. And then CCJ, nice tight, low volume inside day above the 5-day moving average. That's not doing anything wrong. Semiconductors, they are cooking right now. NVIDIA will start with the king of the market is back, making all-time highs. Just wanted to point out, first off, how this rally really got started. We had a gap down and a couple big expansion bars, but this was just kind of a snapback before we put in a higher low. And then really the tradable trend started when we had this unfilled gap up between the 21st and the 22nd of April. We rallied through the 10 and the 20-day moving averages, kind of consolidated, and then had a oops reversal where we gapped down, rallied back through, closed through the 5-day moving average, and then followed that through with a support gap up, confirmed support at that 50-day moving average, and then started trending higher. And then lately, you could see all the subtle gap ups. That's actually a support gap. All the subtle gap ups on the way to new highs. Finally, we got that kind of shakeout on Monday with the gap down. And then we got expansion bar, expansion bar, expansion bar, new all-time highs for NVIDIA, picking up on volume. Great to see that the king is back at all-time highs. CRDO, higher highs, higher lows, made a new all-time high today. Not doing anything wrong. A little bit weak closing range, but on very low volume. And then AVGO, another higher high, higher low, new closing highs. Would want to be watching this for that 10-day moving average and the gap zone low. A theme that I've seen emerging is Chinese stocks lately. Let me just jump to the ETF XLB or XLB, KWEB. If we zoom out on that, we can even switch to like a weekly chart. you could see just how massive this weekly base is. Since 2022 bottom, really hasn't gone anywhere just yet. Kind of reminds me of Roblox. If we switch to that weekly chart, before it got going, we had multiple years of basing, and then we started breaking out on some volume. We're definitely not there yet on KWEB, but it does look like we're kind of ending the right side of the base here. So going back to the individual stocks that caught my eye, TIGR, massive volume today, up 22.3%, nice closing range. Just overall, a big base here, kind of wavy with it. So when you do get these kind of wavy bases, I really want to see a move that starts on massive volume, like what we got today. But we've seen in the past that those big volume moves, unless they follow through to the upside, tend to end the trends. So we had that move, then down, that move, then down. So hopefully this is the start of a new uptrend and we see follow through to the upside. Because I think this is one of the higher potential names in China. TME, we covered this yesterday, but kind of just holding that 5-day moving average, tightening up. Another one with kind of a massive base that we're breaking out of right now. And then FUTU up 6% today, double bottom base, put in the handle, a couple kind of gross bars through here, May 29th and 30th around earnings. But since then, good gap up today, strong closing range. And with that theme, if American stocks need to take a break right now, as we're seeing with the leaders pulling back, this could be a theme that gets some money rotated to. And then I just wanted to cover some of the other distributions throughout the market that I saw today. I labeled this as kill bars. So Toast is one that we've been following for a while. We closed below not one gap up zone, but two. Not ideal action. Down on volume, down 7.1%. Lemonade, I haven't updated this chart, but we closed into this support gap. Not great action through the 5 and the 10-day moving average. Still holding the 20-day. So as long as we hold that overall, it's okay. But some gross action while the indexes made, or while Nasdaq made a new high. HIMS, we had that gap down on Monday, tight day yesterday, and then today was actually up like 7 or 8% in the morning. Reversed, lost the VWAP, and then just flushed the rest of the day, ending the day down 3.5%. So another kind of growth stock favorite that we've started to see some distribution with the bar on June 3rd, mini rally, and then massive gap down on Monday, and some more distribution today. NBIS had an outside down day, closing within that support gap, still above the 10-day moving average. So again, not horrible, but we're starting to take notes of these breakouts that aren't sticking, some distribution on the way down, and we want to see if these follow through on the way down or if they get supported at key moving averages, support gaps, high volume closes, those kind of key areas that we're looking at. On the ETF front, just wanted to cover a couple here. We talked about the semiconductors individually. SMH closed above its last resistance gap before all-time highs. Great gap up, strong close with NVIDIA's strength. CIBR, cybersecurity, another leading group in the market, new highs with a gap up. A little bit weaker of a close overall, but still some positive action today. BLOK, uh, gap up, middle of the range close with Robinhood and Coinbase as their main holdings. And then what was the other one? There was one other. Okay, web, and we already talked about that. NLR, that's the nuclear ETF. That's one that we've been covering for a while. Pulled in the 5-day moving average and support gap, lighter volume than yesterday. So still not terrible by any means, just kind of like a down day. Would love to see this kind of chop around, let the 20-day EMA catch up to this support gap low at right around 105, and then build like a 2 or 3 weeks base here, and then hopefully get going again. All right, now we got some long setups and some short setups to go over. Honestly, it was a little bit tough finding long setups in the market today. So a lot of these are kind of B plus names, not anything that I'm taking with very high conviction. I do think we're getting a little bit long in this rally, and we talked about the comparison with 2020 with that V recovery when we had that the first new highs after the COVID bottom. We had an acceleration in the indexes for 3 days, and then we had a 5% gap down and a lot of volatility for about 3 weeks before the uptrend continued. Kind of think that's what we'll get now. I mean, we'll take it day by day, but there's a few reasons to be cautious. We're not seeing as much traction or fluid traction as we want to see from our longs. So, not to downplay it, here are some long setups. We have SoFi. This uppercut and failed at the resistance gap today. I'll be watching for a pullback buy into the 10-day moving average, into this gap zone at 15.38, and then just have my stop at $15. So about a 2% stop on that one. NRG was on the watch list today through yesterday's high as the pivot. We actually went through that pivot and then closed slightly red, but still above the 5 and the 10-day moving averages, and some relative strength compared to the other energy names. So if this is just kind of like a squat day, coming back through the pivot at 155 is viable, and then I would use the HVC at 150. So about a 3%, 3.5% risk on this trade. SE, not technically a Chinese name, I don't think, Singapore, but one that has shown relative strength and has the ability to run, obviously, from 34 to 150. A couple more days tightening up here, allowing the 50-day moving average to catch up would be ideal. But if we have a gap up, kind of like an opening range break or through today's high is viable versus whatever the low of yesterday is. But again, I would love a little bit more chop, let that 50-day moving average catch up, and then maybe we can get a lower risk entry point on a 50-day moving average undercut and rally. CME, this was on the watch list yesterday. We got the China theme in mind. Just want to take this through the gap zone high or yesterday's high as a potential entry. Just squatted today, not doing anything wrong. Royal Caribbean, RCL, looking for a 10-day moving average and gap up zone undercut and reclaim as the entry versus the 20-day moving average and gap zone. Snowflake, this is one that we've been watching this support gap zone for any pullback, but we instead confirmed to the upside. Kind of a choppy day today. We're just looking for kind of a breakout retest of the 10-day moving average and gap zone at 214 as a potential entry versus the 20-day moving average at 208.30. Elf is a name that's doubled off the bottom with a lot of strength and many gap ups. Recently on Monday, that was really the buy point where we gapped down, we undercut the support gap, and then immediately reclaimed it, opened on the low, closed near the high of the day, back at the 5-day moving average. So some good strength off of Monday. Now we just want to see if this can kind of flag out, retest that gap zone and the 20-day moving average around 115, and then my stop would just be under like 113.60, really tight, about a 1% risk. ARM, another semiconductor stock that's catching my radar. Massive double bottom base, kind of looks like NVDA, just not as strong. Um, Looking for a pullback into that 10-day moving average and gap zone over the next couple days. If it happens on one day, be a little concerned, but overall strong. CRDO, 10-day moving average gap zone test at 85. NVIDIA, pullback and kind of retest of this breakout on a market weakness at 145 would be a really nice spot. But I'll be trying this if it comes back into the gap zone from today at 148. Just play that versus the 10-day moving average and see if I can get a quick entry there. MSTR, we talked about the strength in crypto. This is kind of a nice space that because it's had the blow off top, it's needed such a long time to wiggle, to consolidate, to shake people out, to get them angry. And finally, we're starting to see some relative strength now here with two unfilled gaps up. We're through all the key moving averages. Now we're just waiting for a pullback into the 5, the 10, the 20, the 50, and this gap zone at 376.80 as a potential entry. And then my stop would be at 367 below this other gap. And Z-scaler, that's another one, just the 10-day moving average support gap area. That's a spot to watch. If we get more distribution on the indexes, the 20-day EMA and support gap is the spot that I feel more comfortable on really sizing up. Next, we got some short setups to go over. GEO, this has been on the short watch list a couple different times, but we had tons of volume on the way down on earnings here, traded sideways while the market went straight up. So some relative weakness phase through here. Then we come into the 200-day moving average, down 7% that one day, and we've just been trickling down on some pretty big volume. This looks very likely to just waterfall down here. So breaking through today's low is an entry, stop at today's high. Just try to see if we can get some momentum to the downside for a quick trade. MMYT, I've covered this every day. It's really starting to set up on the short side. We had another test of the 20-day moving average and resistance gap through 97.60. We failed at that area, came in and tested the support gap, and the 5-day moving average closed above that. So now from a little bit of contraction, we'll see which direction this breaks. Through today's low is shortable, or if we get like a gap up, loss of VWAP, that's shortable versus today's high in the 20-day EMA. SFM, this had a breakout back in June 2nd, and then immediately went through a phase of relative weakness with 3 or 4 gap downs. We've had a nice bounce, but it looks like this is now a potentially lower high. Right after a strong day on the 23rd, we had a distribution day on the 24th, followed through the 5, the 10, the 20, the 50-day moving averages today, down 1.1%. Not going to be a fast mover, but a name that's made a massive move from $23 up to 164. So when it does start to roll down, you could see you could get a really nice move if you're patient playing this to the downside. BFLY, this was on the short watch list through $2. I haven't gotten a position in this just yet, but I'm still just watching this for a break under today's low to kind of accelerate the move to the downside. In the perfect world, we get a mini rally to the 10-day moving average and then like a lower high pivot breakdown. We'll see how it goes. RR, this was on the short watch list through here, this resistance gap area. We said uppercut and fail is shortable at 250. It came all the way down to 173, bounced at the 20-day moving average and support gap. And today was really the short entry as it uppercut and failed $2, so a round number, the 20-day EMA, and the resistance gap high at 203. That is the spot that I'm watching for tomorrow, just an uppercut and fail of $2 to get short. And then I'll manage my risk against the 20-day EMA. QMCO, I'm still short this, and I think this is just going to continue to waterfall down. Good outside down day on lighter volume, which ideally you see more volume picking up. But overall, this is one of those quantum names that had a massive move from $2 up to $90. And then instead of building out the right side of the base like a lot of the quantum names have, it's put in lower high, lower high, lower high, and now really starting to accelerate to the downside. So I think this is a name that can fall apart pretty quickly. I don't even think it's an actual quantum stock. They just call themselves Quantum Corporation. So Victoria's Secrets, not good action. We put in a lower high on June 9th. On earnings, we sold off through the key moving averages at a 5-day trading tight, 1-day rally into the 10-day moving average and resistance gap. Another test of that area today with a gap up that immediately sold off. So just looking for a lower test of that at 1950 as a potential short versus the 50-day and 20-day moving average. $20, nice round number as a potential stop there. And then see if that can continue to roll down. DXYZ, another one of those speculative names that went from $10 up to $70 back in November and December of last year. Then has basically just put in a lower high at $50, came in, tested the 200-day moving average and support gap, another lower high, another resistance gap, another test of the 200-day, and now potentially another lower high. Today was really the short entry versus yesterday's low and losing the 20-day EMA at 39.80 and a loss of 40. Um, I'll be watching for like a mini rally in the morning, then a loss of VWAP as a entry stop at the highs of the last 2 days. This is another one that I think once it starts to unravel, we can get some nice alpha. And finally, NAKA. This is one that really thinly traded name, so definitely have to size it appropriately. But had a run from $1 up to $30, uppercut the previous high just by a couple dollars, and then failed at that area. So everyone who kind of bought that breakout immediately got either stopped out or got caught in this. We had a big trickle down from $30 down to $10. Since then, we're just kind of trading sideways with weaker and lower highs all along the way. And if we are seeing momentum just exiting the market, which kind of feels that way, even though the Nasdaq made new highs and NVIDIA made new highs today, these are the names that can take a very hard beating right away. Take a look at the quantum names back in January of this year. When momentum leaves the market, these speculative names can give you some of the best returns. But because they're so thin and they have the ability to double and triple like they do, you have to size them a little bit lower or trade them with larger size intraday. But personally, I don't like holding any of these smaller names with a lot of size overnight. Not worth the risk, in my opinion. But for intraday trades, you can size these and make really nice performance boosters with them. So with this one, just looking for a break under today's low, try to accelerate to the downside of the 50-day moving average. That's about a 30% move. That would be a great performance booster. So that's the market recap for Wednesday, June 25th. New all-time highs in the Nasdaq and NVIDIA, but distribution basically everywhere else. NAAIM at 94. We'll get those exposure levels updated tomorrow. Really interested to see where those come in at. So if you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.